Now let me ask you this about Creighton.
Okay.
We have talked quite a bit on this pod about, Creighton struggling to kind of find itself. Pop Isaacs gets hurt. They don't have the personnel that they did last year. How has Creighton been able to do this over the past 2 or 3 weeks?
This is going to be interesting because for listeners who have been here, for yourself even, in early December, I remember saying maybe Creighton changes its identity.
I remember you saying
just a little bit, not full on Fred Hoiberg, Nate Lenzer. Hey, we're gonna just shut teams down every night. But we knew while they had to find their footing, and if they never did, which they have obviously, but while they were trying to find that after losing Pop Isaacs, they were gonna have to defend a little bit. You knew that Steven and Ryan were going to contribute every night. You just kind of knew that. And if opponents were able to take them away, it was going to take somebody else. Yeah. Regardless of what happened on that end of the floor, they were going to have to defend.
Yeah.
So they did that for the first half at Marquette and then kind of let it get away in the second. Did that against St. John's. We've talked about that already. But they especially did it at UConn because the Huskies, again, they were without Liam McNeely. But when those two played, UConn was averaging 82 points a game, and Creighton held them to 63. And that was a huge part of that one is that Mason Miller, crazy to say, and Jason Green really clamped down Alex Caravan. Insane to say.
Yeah.
The lone returning starter from last year's national championship team was clamped by a mix of Mason Miller and Jason Green. And that was emblematic of what Creighton did to UConn. Again, held them 19 points below their season average. And then let me pull this up really quick on Omaha.com for those who are wondering.
People should check that website out.
Yeah, they should check that website out. So at DePaul was no different. DePaul entered Tuesday hitting essentially 38% of its threes. It's a large part of the reason why they had been in games. Large part of the reason why they took Marquette to overtime, a week before Tuesday.
Has DePaul won a game yet?
And then they beat Georgetown.
Okay, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
So, large part because of their three-point shooting. They finished 19 of 63 from the field against Creighton, 3 of 23
Oh, my God.
from deep. And they missed their first 11 from deep. It was DePaul's. They had 19 first-half points. That was their fewest of the season. They shot 30%. That was their worst of the season. And their 3 threes were their fewest of the season. So this team has really hung its hat on its defense over the last 2 games especially. And they clamped Providence, struggling Providence too. But they've really hung their hat on the defense. And then they've gotten contributions from Jemiah Neal and Isaac Trout, which has been huge. Jemiah Neal has been the third option to take pressure off of Ashworth and Kalkbrenner in the starting 5, and then Isaac's been the 6th man off of the bench. And maybe more importantly in that equation with Isaac Trout is he gives them a different defensive matchup instead of Jackson McAndrew. So that's how I think they've done it, really. I think they've kind of hung their hat on their defense while they have got their feet under them. And this is about the time of year Greg McDermott teams find their footing.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what happened. And now they're projected. They're third in the Big East right now. I think they're tied technically for third with UConn, but they beat UConn, so they have the head-to-head. So they're behind Marquette and St. John's, or St. John's, I think, and then Marquette. And then they're in third, tie for third, however you want to look at it. Drastically different than what we thought this team was going to be a month ago. And they're projected to finish 21-10 and 14-6 in the Big East. That would be an insanely, wildly successful season.
Yeah.
Compared to what we thought in early December, especially after they lost Pop Isaacs.
Yeah.
Wilson, the question for you, I think any Nebraska fan listening to this needs this question answered. What do the Huskers have to do to get one? Because it's a pretty brutal stretch coming up.
It is.
And it'd really not be advantageous if this losing streak fell to 8 in a row.
No, it wouldn't. And it's going to be a grind. As we have talked about, they've lost 5 in a row. Coming up, they're at Wisconsin, at home against Illinois, at Oregon. That is not easy. There's nothing easy in those 3 games.
Gotta have some dogs.
They
for
do.
Sure, man. For sure. In those last 4 minutes.
Those last 4 minutes,
gotta have some dogs.
They do have some dogs.
For sure.
Anyway. It starts on the defensive end. Fred Hoiberg has talked about it a lot. He's said, Nebraska's defensive edge has come and gone. Their toughness specifically. He said that after the Rutgers game. He said that last night after the USC game. Bryce Williams said that after the USC game. Just not tough enough, which I think is interesting because Nebraska is playing hard, as Fred Hoiberg has said. You
can come to expect that of them.
Yeah. It's not an effort thing. It's toughness. It's just that defensive edge that has just been kind of lacking. This team, you see it at times. You see times where they are scoring, where they're getting stops, where everything looks how it is supposed to look. But I think in the past 5 games, Nebraska just hasn't put together 40 consecutive minutes of good basketball, and that's what you need to do in the Big Ten. We saw them kind of sleepwalk through some non-conference games, Bethune-Cookman, games where they weren't at their best for the full 40 minutes and they could get away with it. You can't get away with it in the Big Ten. And we've seen them put together some really good performances, Indiana, UCLA, Creighton.